Hello and welcome to Sound Like, and in today's video we're going to be having another look at Map of the Problematic. I've taken some time to reflect and look at my Sound Like videos, and I think that it's time to redo a lot of them, and Map of the Problematic is one of them that kind of hit the top of my list of ones that I really need to delve back into and do another whole new Sound Like video for. I at least like to think that my sound has improved since when I first made my Sound Like map of sound, and I wanted to share with you the approach that I make for the sound that I get for it now. So this is Sound Like Map of the Problematic. For this song, you're going to want to use a guitar that's got a humbucker in it, so I'm going to be using my New Era Manson. The sound that I hear in the opening of the song sounds like it's trying to do a lot. It's got a good amount of clarity in the top end and a lot of low end grit and response as well. So in order to achieve that sound for my drives, I'm using my Boss OS2 and my MXR Brown Acid. The OS2 has the colour or the blend between overdrive and distortion bang on at 12 o'clock, with a good even split between overdrive and distortion, with the drive at 3 o'clock. That blend between overdrive and distortion allows me to get a good strong sound as you would from a distortion, and the openness and mid-range frequency attention to detail as you do from an overdrive. The Brown Acid has the fuzz cranked all the way, with the tone control at around between 12 and 1 o'clock. For my setup, the pitch shifting comes from the Digitech Whammy. On its own, it does not do step sequence rhythmic pitch shifting. It's receiving MIDI data, in my case, from Logic Pro. I know a lot of people have asked me in the past what the sequence is for the pitch shifting, and I would imagine people will still do that. So this is the sequence for the pitch shifting. Note that there are two parts for this. You'll also note if you listen to the song that different part of the sequence shifts in the first 4 bars or runs of the intro part. So pay attention to that, as that is what is shifting as the song goes on. It's quite deceptive and it's quite easy to kind of just completely bypass that, but there is that difference, so do listen out for it. My guitar tone for this part of the song is very straightforward. It's the guitar signal into the ES8 into the whammy, then it's being split with either drive on either side, and then going into my amp setup. Very simple, very straightforward, especially when you look at other sounds that I've done before that are a little bit more complicated. It's just Brown Acid on one side and OS2 on the other. Individually they have their own sort of sound, but then together, especially with one on each channel, they help to create a good wide immersive stereo field. The low end grit from the fuzz and that mid frequency kind of sound focus from the OS2 to really push it out, really complement one another to create a good solid wide sound. And that's pitch shifting, that rhythmic pitch shifting helps to kind of push that sound even further to make something that is really, really immersive, I think. The verse of Map of the Problematic is very similar to the intro. What we're hearing from the intro is the very kind of wide, saturated sound that's doing quite a lot. For the verse, it's a lot more stripped out because the song is really opened up and it's really kind of moving. So I take the view to take a step back in terms of what the guitar is trying to do, and how I do that is just remove the Brown Acid. So all that's in there in the signal chain is just the whammy and then the OS2 going to my full amp setup. That stripped back aspect fits really well with the overall sound from the song itself. The bass is in there, so it's got the low end covered. With the OS2 focusing on both the distortion and an overdrive, it's still quite wide in terms of the sort of sound that it's kind of really going for. The openness from an overdrive that you really get really kind of coming out there in front, and the strength and the kind of rigidity from a distortion underneath there, but still quite present. And split between 12 o'clock, there is an equal balance between the two. As I've said in quite a lot of my sound likes, my OS2 is a very overly used or overly played, or however you want to say, pedal that I use quite a lot. It works so well for verse parts or choruses because it can just sit in the mix, not trying to do too much, but does exactly what you need it to do. So when you're kind of designing your sound yourself, you often might want to think about just having a distortion that's not trying to do too much. I honestly argue that the OS2 is a brilliant pedal and well worth anyone's attention when they want to kind of find a new sound, or they haven't tried it before, or get a good solid rhythm sound that they just know will work every single time. Relying on just one drive sound simplifies the setup, as you don't need it to do that much. The main focus of the guitar for this part of the song is that rhythmic pitch shifting which is going on throughout. The fact that it is doing pitch shifting and popping out as the song goes on and so on it kind of does the work for you. As long as you can get that pitch shifting going on in there, at least a convincing way, the sound is covered. You've just got to get a guitar tone that's just going to push that sound and get some decent dirt and gain behind it. I know that there are a lot of ways to recreate that pitch shifting sound. The way I do it with a whammy pedal is, I would say, probably one of the easiest ways to do it, because it is a dedicated pitch shifter from the whammy and you can send it MIDI data, and it works really well to control the entire unit, both in terms of preset shifting and also turning the pedal on and off. Sounds quite simple and rudimentary, but a dedicated pitch shifter doing what it's supposed to do and very quickly is great. I know that not everyone can do it, especially considering things like I'm using Logic Pro, which is a Mac only piece of software, which is kind of immediately a barrier to a lot of people. Logic Pro itself costs money. It's around £200, and then there's a whammy pedal, which is another 170 odd quid or something. You've got to get an audio interface. There's so many ways that you can create that sound. This is just the way that I do it, and this is what it sounds like. Looking at the first chorus, you might be tricked into going back over to that first sound. In my case, it's the OS2 with the brown acid, as the brown acid covers that low end grit and the OS2 really pushes out quite clearly. However, I would suggest a different approach. Still focus on just one drive, and this time switching from the OS2 or that sort of kind of broad rhythm type sound to something that's a lot more distorted and more pinpoint. In my case, I'm using the DS1. Historically, I'd used the MXR prime distortion, and recently I'd switched and gotten a DS1 pedal, because the one that I've got is the anniversary pedal. It's nice and shiny and orange, and I kind of fancied a new distortion, just because I just wanted a new sound. Both the prime distortion, as I'd used previously, and the DS1 broadly work the same way. A good solid strong distortion and not too much low end focus. They work really well for this type of approach. And the approach is to not have something that's too overly low endy, and to have something that's going to cut through the mix quite well. The OS2 doesn't cut through the mix as well, especially with the settings that I've got it with in terms of overdrive and distortion. A dedicated distortion pedal is what I would suggest at this point. In terms of the settings on my DS1, I've got my drive at 3 to 4 o'clock and the tone anywhere between 11 and 2, mostly leaning towards 11, maybe 12, but for your case where you will have something a bit different, I would suggest anything between those ranges would work. The Boss DS1 is quite sensitive and kind of already quite high endy, so I want to roll that off as much as I can and just have that be as kind of suited as it can be. It might seem like a very simple change and kind of almost very pointless to go from the verse sound into this chorus sound, but as I always say in my soundlight videos, have something that's going to change with each section, or have a sound that's going to change with each part of the song. It makes it much more immersive, it's much more fun to play with, and you won't lose that kind of sound of the guitar as the song goes on. Yes, I had said that the pitch shifting is going to make it stand out through the entire song, but you could kind of get bored of it, or you kind of could become kind of less sensitive to it. It keeps things moving, interesting, and a lot more kind of engaging. If you take a step back and look at what the other instruments are doing, the bass line is actually the same 4 notes for the entire song almost, apart from the intro, and the drums are kind of pretty much simplistic as well. It's a very simplistic song in terms of how it's moving, so if you want to make it interesting, change up the sounds and change up the textures that you're working with, and this is what my setup sounds like for chorus 1. The break is very ambiguous in terms of what you can do with it. It's not really that long, so you can do a lot with it. You can either do what it's doing on the original version of the song, where it's just playing that intro riff, so you could switch over to the intro sound and that'll work just fine, or you can focus on what Matt does live, which is just make some weird noise. And you can take it a step further. You can keep the pitch shifting going, or you can take it out. It's completely up to you. What I do, I like to remove the pitch shifting and just stay with the DS1 and just do some simple bends or something, just make a weird noise, just because it A, is not a very long part of the song, and B, you have that ability to just really differentiate it from everything else in the song, and you may as well. Because it's so short, I'm okay with keeping that same amount of drive and distortion. The distortion pedal itself, the DS1, is perfect for this part because, as I've said, there's not a lot of low end to it and it can really cut through the mix really well. The fact that the drums and the bass are doing what they're doing, kind of doing some fills and really opening it out, helps to push that guitar out even further. And this is my simplistic approach to what that sounds like. Moving on now to the final chorus of Map of the Problematic. Now this is the biggest departure from the rest of the sounds that we've had so far. What they've done is be very drive focused, from fuzzes, overdrives and distortions. The pitch shifting is going on throughout the entire time, as we've already said, and if you have ears you know that already. What we're doing for the second chorus, or what I do, is take down that level of gain and switch it to the MXR Timmy overdrive. There's still a little bit of gain in there that's set to around 12 o'clock. I still want the guitar to kind of come out in the mix and still be heard, but to not be anywhere near as distorted as it has been before. Listening to the rest of the instruments, the intensity is coming down as well, so you want to work with that drop down in kind of gear, as it were, and have a sound that's going to work just as well. So a low gain from an overdrive works really well to immerse yourself in that, and to get it even further, I introduce some delay. The settings for the delay could be quite open to interpretation. There is no delay on the original song as far as I know. This is something that I'm introducing myself, so it's just something to kind of push that sound even further and kind of have my own spin on it. In terms of settings for this, it's not trying to do too much. The level is at around 11 o'clock with the feedback at around 10. It's not being overpowering, partly because if you have a delay on top of all that rhythmic pitch shifting, it then starts to kind of be overpowered and just turn into one giant mess. I'm using the delay to just round off that kind of that whole feel and get some ambient sound in there, just to give it something to kind of push it into a realm that we've not heard so far in this song. It's entirely up to you if you want to have that approach, as I say for a lot of songs, but I would suggest to have that sort of approach to give it something new and just something a bit different. In my case, obviously I've got a stereo board, so the delay helps to widen that stereo field and feel of immersion even further. If you have a mono board, don't worry about it too much at all. You can still put a delay in there to give an ambience to it. It's just not going to be as immersive, but it will still work really well to create a new sound that's going to fit really well for this part of the song. But keep in mind, just to have that delay to be a little bit more subtle than you would use it for usually. So that was another look at Map the Problematic, and I hope you enjoyed it, and do let me know what you thought about it down in the comments below. I wanted to redo this song because it's a personal favourite of mine. It unfortunately isn't being played live anymore, which is a bit sad, so I'm kind of concerned that it's kind of being forgotten about, but hopefully this is kind of keeping it alive a little bit. I've also seen in my own research for making a sound for this song that the information on the pitch shifting has been quite difficult to get hold of. So I hope with this video and me showing what that pitch shifting is, makes it a little bit easier for people to find out and affect into their own setups themselves. So as always, I do hope that you found the video interesting at least, and do let me know what you thought about it down in the comments below. And tell me what you'd like me to do a sound of next. In the meantime, I've been Harry, and thanks for watching.